Hey there, wellness family, Peter Gordon here. Thank you for clicking on today's video, which is titled What I Learned About Vulnerability. So before I get into the heart of today's topic, please do me a small, tiny little favor. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, like this video, comment on it, and also hit that notification bell to make sure that you're notified every Thursday when I post a brand new video. So let's get into the heart of today's topic, which is what I learned about vulnerability. But before I do that, I want to make mention of two things. Number one, when I make videos like this, I'm often talking about my personal experiences. And then it is my hope that you'll be able to draw parallels between my experiences and yours and be able to make profound changes in your life, okay? Number two, when I say vulnerability in this video, bear in mind that what I'm referring to is emotional vulnerability, all right? So with those things in mind, let's get into the heart of today's topic. So what did I learn about vulnerability, or in this case, emotional vulnerability? Well, there are three key things that I learned. And I want to mention this. Number three was perhaps the last one that I learned. And I think it's in a certain way kind of the most important, to be honest with you. So hang around towards the end of the video for number three, okay? So what exactly did I learn? Well, before I can even tell you what those three things are, let's try to have a definition of what I mean by emotional vulnerability. So what exactly is emotional vulnerability? It's really, in a layman's term, a willingness to acknowledge your emotions, good ones, bad ones, all of those things. But it's most important, it's not just about acknowledging it to yourself, but being able to acknowledge it to others, right? Somebody that you choose to be emotionally vulnerable to. So with that understanding in mind, here are the three things I learned when I became more emotionally vulnerable. So number one, I have never been emotionally vulnerable. So what exactly do I mean by that? Now, let me put this in perspective for you. I'm 46 years old, and I can honestly say that it was not until age 44 where I truly tapped into my emotionally vulnerable side. I'll be very honest with you. In fact, I was married for just over 10 years, and at no point throughout that marriage can I tell you honestly that I was ever emotionally vulnerable to my ex-wife. The reality was I was never taught to do that. I was taught that to show your emotions was a sign of weakness. I never saw it as a sign of strength. So at no point in my entire life up until age 44 was I truly emotionally vulnerable with myself and to anyone that is significant others, no one. And in some ways it makes me sad that I was never able to tap into things that bothered me or things that gave me joy. I was just closed off, and that was my reality. So that's the first thing I learned about emotional vulnerability, that once I became emotionally vulnerable, I realized that for an entire portion of my life, a good portion rather, I never practiced emotional vulnerability. So that's my number one. So number two, I became self-aware. Once I tapped into my emotionally vulnerable side, once I was unafraid to look at it, talk about it, I became extremely self-aware. I became self-aware that I hated the career path that I was on. I had been on this path because I thought I was trying to make the most money and all that good stuff, you know, and I hated what I was doing. But I was never able to truly honestly think about it because I was never emotionally vulnerable with myself. I essentially commodified or packaged my emotions into this little box, left it over there. But once I became emotionally vulnerable with myself, I was able to look at a particular thing that I was doing and say, I don't want to do that anymore. I was able to look at people that I was hanging out with and said, I don't want to be around them anymore. That was the big thing that becoming emotionally vulnerable did. It made me become self-aware. So that's my number two. So number three, and I'm glad you stuck around because as I mentioned before, this is the most important one. And it is this: you have to earn my emotional vulnerability. What I mean by that is this. When I became emotionally vulnerable or became aware of it and was okay with it, I was too free with it with just about anyone that I met. The problem with that is people can use your emotional vulnerability against you, right? So whoever you choose to be emotionally vulnerable with, you must trust that that person has earned that right. right? They've earned that right to tap into your most insecure self, your most secure self. The reality is your most vulnerable self, right? They have to earn that right. You never give away emotional vulnerability freely. Again, they must earn it. I did that a lot when I first became emotionally vulnerable. People that I would meet, I was just free with my emotions. And what happens is they use it against you. They use it for their own gain, if you will, at times. And that's just the reality of people. So when you become emotionally vulnerable, be sure to guard it. Only give it away to those who have earned that right to receive it. So, hope this all makes sense, family, and stay well.